Yeah, it is the Sixers Talk podcast brought to you by Wilmington University. WilmU Works, Danny Pommells, Noah Levick, Ben Berry, Noah Levick, Danny Pommells. So glad you could be with us. We are approaching the dog days of summer. It has been hot in Philly the last few days. Hopefully y'all been cooling under some AC. The Sixers are continuing to be in the news for so many different reasons. We will get into Gilbert Arenas' comments about why Doc Rivers is trash, and we'll also
didn't say
about
trash.
Close enough, right? But we'll get into those comments, plus these former Sixers players, former Philly athletes. It's just a trend that expands over all of the major sports. Former Philly athletes once again entering into a championship scenario after having played here. And yes, I'm talking about the Celtics, but it could have been Miami Heat and Jimmy Butler going, and it is still rung true. But let's start with kind of the news du jour. Joel Embiid, the off-injured big man who really played through a lot of injuries this season. The most time that he missed was from COVID, which was really, nothing anyone could do about that. Everyone is contracting that at some point or time or another. If you haven't contracted it, good on you. But a procedure on his index finger that we didn't know about. Of course, he had his right ligament and the ligament in his right thumb repair, but apparently there's a procedure on his index finger. Of course, we know about the orbital fracture. So he was essentially a cyclops with no hands, just out there trying to will the Sixers past the second round. But Noah Levick, you got some insight on this. What exactly happened? And I mistakenly in our group chat said surgery on the index finger, but it was actually just a procedure. So give us the clarity there, please.
Well, yeah, the Sixers' official framing of it is he had a separate procedure on his left index finger in addition to the expected surgery to repair the right thumb sprain that everyone knew about. And then the orbital fracture, you recall after Game 6, he said he didn't expect he'd need surgery on that. And it seems like the Sixers medical staff was satisfied that the progress there was good and it was going to heal on its own. But yeah, the index finger didn't catch me entirely off guard. But yeah, it was not something widely reported. The Sixers weren't listing it on any of their injury reports. I did notice after he returned for Game 3 against the Heat, he had his left middle finger and left index finger taped together. I actually noted in the story that night almost just this sense of the injuries were piling up for him, and regardless, it was important that he was available for his team, despite being very below 100% physically. And this is another way in which that was the case. Of course, he was reluctant to discuss specifics throughout the playoffs of how exactly these injuries were hampering him. And he called it a lose-lose situation because if he wanted to detail on this stuff, people would have considered it excuses. But look, he evidently had even more legitimate injuries than the general public was aware of. The bottom line here is he's expected to still be good to go for training camp, and nothing here was so serious, as to merit huge concern. But these guys deal with serious injuries throughout the course of the season that don't often go reported, and this is one example of that. And I was also reminded too, I think it was back in early April, he showed us this very large cut on his middle finger. And he said that had been opening up on and off for a couple of months, just this laceration on his right middle finger. So he gets hit a lot. People like to be physical with him, like to try to get him off his game in that way. And his fingers, honestly, are probably going to be pretty mangled when this is all said and done for him in the NBA.
Yeah, you want to be a pro athlete, right? Ben Berry,
Yeah.
are your hands mangled from all of your CrossFit work?
No, my hands, they fine. They nice.
Look at those mitts. Look at those mitts.
No, actually, I got sausage fingers. Multiple people just pointed out that I have sausage fingers, short, fat fingers. So Embiid's injuries is unfortunate, But it's the off season for the Sixers at least. He'll be back healthy for a full training camp, which is good and nice. I won't put too much thought into what would have happened if he was fully healthy in the playoffs and things like that. He wasn't. It's something that
that's probably never going to happen. Just never.
It's probably never going to happen. Everyone's injured at that point in time of the year, and I'm not going to waste any injuries and waste any time and energy thinking about what if he was healthy. I don't think any Sixers fan should either. Again, hope for a full recovery. It just was a procedure, as Noah pointed out in our group chat, not the whole surgery, as you said, Danny. So to me, it is a non-issue. It's not much to worry about or think about at the moment.
You know what, though? It does make me feel this when I think about it. It's like it's just easy to draw the inference for me. Like, the issue with the Sixers in some aspects is that they can't have a guy like Embiid who gets nicked up, and rightfully so. I mean, Novak Djokovic, Nikola Jokic, was so fed up with getting nicked up that he whiplashed Marcus Morris in the back because he felt like there was a call that was he got fouled really hard, and he was tired of being fouled hard. So he was so upset and reactionary that he, ended up getting suspended for that. But I'm just saying, like, you got a guy like Joel Embiid who gets nicked up, and so many big men do, but then you're not supporting him with a superstar who can carry the load when he's not on the floor, which may happen, pretty often because of the nature of him being, a big man who might not get the benefit of the doubt on all these calls, and referees see it a different way because of their size, that maybe these hits and bumps and things like don't affect them the same way. But you got a superstar like James Harden, who's more of a playmaker than the guy who we saw in Houston. So it's like you need to support him with maybe younger players who can withstand and battle through injuries and be on the floor when he can't be. Like, I don't know if you guys see it the same way, but I see that as like a glaring thing. Like, you got to support him with people who are, viable and can also be out there carrying the load when he's not there.
They obviously did not fare well in the first two games of the Miami series without him. And I think for me, it just, the bottom line there is backup center. There's a certain standard you got to meet. And the fact that, of course, DeAndre Jordan was the preferred option to start game one was a problem. And now moving forward, they'll hope that Paul Reed can develop and become a reliable piece for them. And I think also there's some optimism that Charles Bassey could have similar success as a second round steal. But look, when they gave Al Horford the massive contract, this was a huge part of the rationale that Joel Embiid would inevitably miss some games, and you wanted to be well equipped in those spots without him. I think as far as like a second star who can carry the load, it is James Harden, and it looks like that's going to be the case. And that's
sorry, Danny.
And they gotta hope for the best, and got to try to build around what they've got as well as possible. But I think backup center has just been such a constant storyline with Embiid on this roster, and it's understandable. I think, though, we don't want to neglect the fact that he just played a career-high 68 games and that he battled through these injuries and held off the surgeries until the offseason and did everything he possibly could to be on the court and perform as well as he could. But absolutely, it's not his fault when he misses some of these games. Even though he didn't miss many this year, like some of these, it's just horrible luck or the fact that he's a superstar who teams like to rough up. And the Sixers, I think, have had a lot of philosophies of how to approach that. The Al Horford one, in retrospect was not correct, but at least the aspect of wanting to have a decent backup center that you could rely on, that part of it was, to me, understandable.
So it's something the Sixers, the backup centers thing is something they need to figure out. It's a constant problem, as Noah pointed out and said, just multiple guys. They've tried to fill the void and just hasn't worked out. Maybe it can be Paul Reed. As to go to Danny's point, like a star, a superstar, I wouldn't say he was a superstar, but the Sixers had a star. And I'm thinking the 2017 season when the Sixers finished on that great run.
No.
That guy played very well, and it just did not work out. He wanted out. The Sixers have to make best with what they have now.
Jimmy Butler? Like, why you got to bring that up?
Oh, I wasn't talking about Jimmy Butler. I was talking about Ben Simmons, 2017.
Oh, 2017.
2017. They finished that season. No, I don't know if you know off the top of your head, but they finished like a 15-game winning streak?
I believe it was a 16-game winning streak. And then
they played a very light schedule, though. That was a light schedule.
Okay.
Then they crushed the Heat in game 1 of the first round.
Yes.
Then they lost game 2. Dwayne Wade had a throwback game, and then Embiid took to Instagram to say he was sick and tired of being babied, and sure enough, he was back wearing the mask for game 3.
So at this point, the Sixers just have to make do with what they have now, and the best option is James Harden, hoping he can go throwback like Dwayne Wade did in game 2 against the Sixers in the playoffs several years ago. Hoping Harden can do that from time to time. I don't see a lot of help coming any other way. So figuring out a viable backup center, hopefully it could be Paul Reed, is, I think, one of the more important things after figuring out Harden coming back next year for how much money. I think that's probably the most important thing. So it's just not like a -40 when Embiid's not playing.
Yeah, man, it would just really behoove them maybe not to be as I'm sure they're looking at all their options, but we have heard them, in pursuit of star hunting, trying to find a third player to go with Harden and Embiid. Maybe behoove them more to just have strong supporting cast members who can prop up the roster. But I would be remiss if we didn't mention, today is June 1st. A lot of really important dates for the Sixers in the month of June. The Brooklyn Nets have until 4 p.m. today to decide if they want to keep or defer the the draft pick that they received, first round draft pick they received from the Sixers in the James Harden trade. So that will be the 23rd overall selection. The Nets can either keep it or wait until next year and hope the Sixers will be worse than they are this year, and that'll be a better draft pick, which could definitely happen depending on how they can reshape this roster and how James Harden decides to either opt in or, be more team friendly with the type of contract that he accepts. So that is another important date because along with the draft on June 23rd, I believe, Harden has until June 29th, the day before free agency, to determine whether or not he will, opt into this $47 million contract. So a few important dates here in the month of June. And, I think I'm definitely leaning the way of if they're not able to secure, a Lillard level superstar to come here to Philly, I'm really a big proponent of making a stronger supporting cast around Embiid, Harden, and Maxey. And I don't include Tobias Harris in that because you might have to trade Tobias in order to make the roster better in some way, shape, or fashion. But I was reading Keith Pompey's article, guys. I know we didn't talk about this, about a topic we would discuss on the podcast, but it's weird that, I was thinking, maybe Matisse and that first round pick, if the Nets don't decide to use it, could be like a trade chip, but they have to draft a player before they can trade them because they can't not make a first round selection in consecutive years. So I wasn't aware of that, but
they can't go back-to-back years without a draft pick. So
right, but I thought at least you could trade it, but
they can draft the player, then they can trade. So
and then trade, but you have to actually draft the player for the team, and then.
So hypothetically speaking, if they wanted like a Zach LaVine from Chicago, they could figure out who the Bulls would want.
Just went in the deep end of the pool, just right in the deep end. Yeah.
Just hypothetically speaking, or I don't know. Let's say they wanted to make a trade with the Jazz, whoever player they would get in return, they would draft a player for the Jazz, figure out
Well,
who
OG
they wanted.
Anunoby, according to Kyle Neubeck, maybe could be a guy that the Sixers might
So we'll see what
pull
happens. Start college, build skills, and complete your degree with Wilmington University. 100% online options and affordable tuition makes WilmU work for you. Learn more at wilmu.edu.
Here we are, gentlemen, in this off season, preparing for hopefully will be a rejuvenated Sixers team, and you have to endure watching the rest of the basketball season, which sometimes, especially for Philly sports fans, they tend to check out when their team is no longer in contention, whether that be hockey, basketball, baseball, football, whatever. But definitely some interesting storylines as it relates to the Sixers with the Celtics. Andre Iguodala is sitting on the Warriors bench, former Finals MVP. But if we're going straight to the recency bias, Ime Udoka, former Sixers assistant coach, who I can't even say they let walk, because I don't even think they really even entertained him as a really viable head coaching candidate. Al Horford obviously took the roundabout way back to Boston, and he is paying dividends for that team in a major way. So much so, as I've mentioned on previous podcasts, my dad is calling me lamenting the loss of Al Horford, which I can't even wrap my head around. But and then Nick Stauskas, a late season G League call-up, falls into the Celtics roster and is headed to the NBA Finals, and playoff bonus money going with it. So it is just, once again, as I mentioned at the top of the podcast, a march of players who used to play in Philly on opposing teams going to a championship scenario. Are you guys worn out by that as Philly guys who have grown up here and rooting for this team? Is that a refrain that you're tired of watching?
Well, I enjoyed the Eastern Conference Finals a lot.
You didn't enjoy all those blowouts. Stop it.
True. Yeah, there were one or two, more blowouts than I would have preferred, but I just, for whatever reason, love that style of basketball and sports in general, where it's very
the Celtic style.
Just like kind of ugly, defensive, oriented, really physical. You got to work for everything. Teams are missing a lot of shots, and people are kind of mystified. And I don't know, something about the weirdness of low-scoring games, like way more than anyone expects in one or two instances. I just really, I don't know, I get a kick out of that. So, I admire that Heat team a lot too. I mean, PJ Tucker, as Joel Embiid said, you're not going to find many guys tougher than that. I thought it was cool to see Gabe Vincent emerge, and I don't know. I liked the series. It was cool. At least Game 7 was super close, as opposed to that preceded it. And it was wild because the game came down to Jimmy Butler taking a shot over Al Horford, and he came up short. And Al Horford, I guess, ultimately made the right play to give Jimmy some space. And
I thought that was a horrible shot by Jimmy, by the way.
Yeah, he's entitled to take it, I think. Obviously, he was spectacular in huge games, and they live and die with his decisions. But yeah, it's not his game. He's not a three-point shooter, even if he does improve in that area in the playoffs. So I don't know. For me, yeah, maybe when I was growing up, it would have been a bummer. But I think right now I enjoy the basketball. I enjoy the characters involved, and some of these guys I got to know a little bit through covering them during their brief trips through Philadelphia. So seeing them have success is at least cool in that way on a personal level. And the Al Horford part of it is just so improbable.
Oh my God.
So unlikely. And, just throughout the time in Philadelphia where things were going downhill, it's like, you had to note the contract is 4 years and it's only $97 million guaranteed, the 109 million maximum. And now he's reportedly going to get the 109 million, those which are team success-based incentives. So he checked off $5 million just by getting to the finals, and then it would be an additional $7 million if Boston won the finals. But it sounds like they're going to pay him that money regardless and kind of do the right thing by their guys. So Al Horford did not fit well here. We're not saying anything revelatory with that statement, and still got something left in the tank, helping a team have deep playoff success.
So, the Al Horford thing, I didn't think that was going to work when they signed him. I remember Danny and Paul, shout out to Paul OG, host of the Sixers Talk podcast, Paul Hudrick. They thought I was crazy and a hater, and many people still think that now. Hasn't worked. I'm glad things have worked out for him since he's left and he's getting his money. I don't hold no ill will for anyone that didn't perform here or anything. I want everyone to do well and be healthy, except when they're playing the Sixers. Except the do well part. Still want people to be healthy. The thing that stings for me is before I get there, Danny, at the moment that Jimmy Butler shot, I thought it was a terrible shot and I hated it. But for someone that had played 48 minutes in game 7, 46 minutes in game 6, and was carrying the Heat on his back, I thought he could take whatever shot he wanted and no one can question it. I definitely thought he should have
Hezzy right there would have killed Al Horford.
I think
right to the back.
Al Horford was on his heels and he should have attacked the basket, but he didn't. Eric Spoelstra was okay with the shot. His teammates were okay with the shot. So I guess I got to be okay with the shot. If the people he's held accountable to are okay with it, I'm going to be okay with the shot. I wish more people would attack the rim than settling for jump shots. But if the Heat can live with it, I guess I'm stuck living with it. Okay, now back to former Sixers going to the NBA Finals. You mentioned Andre Iguodala, Nick Stauskas, Al Horford. I'm going to get to Ime Udoka. Last year was Dario Saric. Mikal Bridges, who the Sixers drafted, traded to the Suns.
Damn.
It doesn't sit well. Ime Udoka, when the Sixers was looking for a coach, you didn't think they gave him a lot of realistic hope to get the job. I thought that they should have just stuck with someone in-house or went out and got a Ty Lue who would get to. Or I was a big fan of Sam Cassell. I just wanted something new, not a retread, as you hate retreads in movies. I feel that way about coaches. You got to try something new, not someone that's been somewhere else. And depending what
Dusty
your
Baker,
definition,
perfect example.
Dusty Baker has been robbed of a lot of great opportunities because those teams stunk when he got there. He made them good. Then they moved on and won, or gone to the World Series after he's left. But no, all right, back to basketball. Back to get me off topic. Ime Udoka was in the building, didn't get real consideration from. That's how it looks from our perspective. He's going to the finals his first year as the Boston coach. He got Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown to buy in on playing defense, passing the ball around, and not relying on themselves 100% to win the games. It's still at times where their jump shots or the shots they're taking are harder than it needs to be, and they should move the ball around. But Jason Tatum has been one of the best defenders in the league this season. Since New Year's, I think maybe Christmas, but definitely since New Year's, the Celtics has been the best team in the NBA. What he's doing is working, and it stinks when you think he was an assistant here, and the Sixers didn't give him a lot of opportunity or a real chance to be the head coach. And this isn't anything to do with my feelings on Doc Rivers. The only thing that makes me feel better about the whole former Sixers, whether it's a coach or a player going to the NBA Finals, is since 1947, there's been a former Knick that's played in the NBA Finals. That's won an NBA Finals championship, not just played, just won a championship, a former Knick since 1947. So that makes me feel a little better.
Every year?
Every year.
Wow.
Who's
the one this year? Is there one this year?
I don't know who it is off the top of my head. Okay. I know last year was Bobby Portis, Jeremy Lin before that.
Luke Cornett on the.
There you go. Luke Cornett.
Bench, so it counts. Yeah. Dang. Yeah. So with Ime Udoka, I think it was clear if you listen to Greg Popovich and people who know what they're talking about, he had the qualities to be a head coach. And for me, even just that season, watching the games, looking at the sideline, just the sense of authority and communication and in-game adjustments, it's like well above what you see from a typical assistant coach. Chatting with Embiid and Horford about how to tweak, the way they're covering the pick and roll, or saying to Thibault, we're kind of trapped, on this possession at the end of the quarter. Just little things that he did during the games where you saw he was going to be well suited to being a head coach one day, and that he got along well with players while still being a leader and being someone whose voice would be heard, among his team. That said, Elton Brand, immediately after that season, the classic question after you fire a coach is what qualities are you looking for? And he emphasized a new voice. And I think from the Sixers' perspective, that 2019-20 season was such a disaster that they were probably less inclined to trust internal options. And, the external was more appealing. And then, of course, Doc Rivers became free and has a long resume and impressed them in the interview process and all of that. I think the Sixers that season were hopeful they'd be like the league's best defense. I mean, they were really hyping themselves up early in that season that this team had immense defensive potential. And then if I recall, I think they finished like 8th in defensive rating. They were a good defensive team, but the impression was they could have been a little bit better, and they didn't pull off, all that was possible for them. Udoka likes his teams, I think, to bother opponents defensively. He likes physicality. He wants really aggressive on-ball defense and variety of coverage. And I think the Sixers made that tough on him in some ways because while Horford, switches better than the typical big man, like the Sixers were playing a lot of lineups with very big men on the floor, and perhaps that wasn't, perfectly suited to what Udoka likes. So yeah, I mean, I think in retrospect, we all saw he was going to be a good head coach, but I can somewhat see why the Sixers, would think that other options for the vacant spot would be more appealing than a guy who was just an assistant on a team that badly disappointed in the 2019-20 season. But Monty Williams as well, of course, last year, another Sixers assistant who has crushed it since leaving. And again, you did not have to be, a basketball savant to see that when they were here, they were going to go on to, lead teams well. And the Sixers didn't think that leading this team was the way to go.
And not only does Udoka leave Philly and take that intel with him, whatever it's worth, he goes to Brooklyn and gathers whatever intel he get there and takes it to Boston. And so not only do they get this coach who is on the come and somehow pull this team out of the dreck of the Eastern Conference. I mean, maybe not dreck, but they were near the bottom of the league at one point, and then rose to be in the conference finals and now the NBA finals. But he brings some of this knowledge and whatnot into this Boston front office where they continue to make these great decisions. Not to mention the Jason Tatum misstep, if we're really tying it all together with the Sixers and how they obviously pursued Markelle Fultz over drafting Jason Tatum and the whole banana in the tailpipe with showing their hand a bit and moving up from 3-1 to get Markelle Fultz. But I think I also, I look at it like, you make a great point with Udoka. I just feel like when I look at the time Ime was here and maybe I guess what you're saying in some instances, Noah, is that maybe Ime didn't think that the Sixers had the roster that he would want to coach. If they had these bigger players and whatnot and not as interchangeable and aggressive or able to be as aggressive defensively, maybe Boston had the roster that he, took more of a liking to. So maybe it was a two-way street. If I'm reading what you're saying
roster
correctly.
this year is pretty big, though.
Yeah, no, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I think if he knew how things were going to pan out with the Celtics, of course he would have loved the idea of coaching this roster as opposed to this year's Sixers. But no, I mean, he wanted a head coaching job, and
he would have taken it at either stop.
I think he even mentioned in a recent interview to Chris Haynes, some of the other teams he interviewed with and was disappointed that he wasn't offered jobs with are not as a high caliber as the Sixers. So I think he was looking for that foot in the door, and the path he took was ultimately obviously like the best one for him. He got more assistant coaching experience in Brooklyn, and then took the step up to leading Boston. And that team was 16-19. I mean, they were on the verge of, really just a brutally disappointing season, and have turned it around by playing the league's best defense. And super impressive, the role he's done there. And
it goes to show injuries are going to happen to all these teams, and they overcame some really significant injuries. And I don't want to make it seem as simple as, like fate, like if you're meant to be in the finals and that's where you're going to be. But teams are prepared or should be prepared for injuries to happen and to be able to overcome them with making either roster moves or the players that are already in-house. And Boston was able to do that. Obviously, Robert Williams, a gigantic part of what they do and part of the success in turning things around for them, but they were able to overcome that. Marcus Smart, Jason Tatum, on and on. So I can't let the Sixers injuries and, Embiid and his orbital fracture, I can't fall back on that as the reason why they aren't able to overcome, the second round stigma or get past that point.
Yeah, Boston's got some great draft picks, and I think that's the foundation of their team and why they're able to overcome some of this stuff. I mean, personally, I love Grant Williams as a prospect, and obviously he's been a great pick for them and unique.
And come along and developed as well, which obviously have had issues.
Yeah, he was knocking down huge threes against Milwaukee, and that
he's a little annoying to me. He talks too much to the refs, and I hate when he's egging the crowd on. But
he's one of those love him on your team, not so much when he's not on. Not to the Pat Beverly extent, but in that same category. But yeah, Boston has I think a lot of those players who check the toughness box, they check the versatility box, and a lot of them are in-house. Really good recent draft picks in Robert Williams and Grant Williams. And unfortunately, injuries, again, linger over these finals as far as, who's going to be available, how healthy is Robert Williams going to be, is Gary Payton II going to participate, and Iguodala's got an injury too and has been sidelined. So,
and don't
from
forget,
a neutral perspective, I hope everyone plays as much as they can and that we get some good hoops.
How about Marcus Smart effing Steph up earlier in the season when he dove at his ankle, and he was the reason Steph missed all that time, and here they are again all meeting in the finals. I just love, to your point about the storylines and whatnot, and the hard-nosed basketball and things like that. There are definitely a lot of endearing qualities about that, and this series should speak to some of that for sure.
Definitely, yeah. Steve Kerr was ticked about that. I'm not sure I've ever seen him that angry in an on-court setting. So I'm sure if Marcus Smart crosses another line in the Warriors' eyes, that we could be in for some fireworks. But yeah, Boston's a great defensive team, and they've got a difficult job on their hands. I personally don't quite think that Udoka can manage a championship in his first year. I think if I had to make a pick, I would go Golden State. But regardless, obviously he's done an awesome job for a first-year head coach.
Where you at with it, Ben? Who you like in the finals?
I like Golden State. I'm thinking Golden State in 6 games. I got them Warriors in 6.
Yeah, I could definitely see it going the Warriors' way. To Noah's point, you would have been thriving in '90s basketball with like the Knicks and the Pistons and the Bulls. That would have been your era, bro. Because I feel you on some of those, possession, the importance, and then those borderline calls that could go either way and things like that. I definitely feel you on the excitement of that basketball. I am leaning Warriors. I'm a Steph guy. I just like Steph. So I feel like they paid enough dues and endured enough. Particularly the Klay Thompson stuff, I think is they're very rewarding and something you could easily latch on to want him to be successful, and definitely considering how he played in that closeout game against the Mavericks. So that's an easy place to root for. And I like Jordan Poole too. So I just cannot, Ime Udoka is probably the person I like the most on that Celtics team because of him being overlooked and a little underappreciated. But I just can't do anything with that green jersey. That green jersey I just
so
no.
You gave reasons why you like the Warriors. You like the Warriors, but do you think they're going to win?
And I'm rooting for them.
Okay,
that covers both of those bases right there. So
that was the question. Yeah, no, I do. I love watching the old '90s games and reading about it. The Blood in the Garden by Chris Herring. I would recommend that. I enjoyed that immensely, and there's some good Doc Rivers stories in there too. Some dust-ups he was involved in that I was actually not aware of. So he had some scrappiness back in his day as a player that I learned about through this book.
That whole Knicks team was willing to fight anybody.
Oh, yeah. Anthony Mason,
Greg Anthony,
Charles Oakley, yeah. John Stark. So
there's a guard that played for the Mavericks. I'm thinking of that play was on that Knicks team. I can't think of. It was a guard. But anyway, definitely.
I didn't even know the whole history about how sort of the flagrant foul system that originates with those Knicks teams in the NBA wanting to curb that out of the game.
Xavier McDaniel, another guy.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Nasty.
Yeah. So I think we certainly have a more pace and space game and a more skill-based game than just pure physicality and brute strength. But I haven't minded seeing a little of the you got to work for everything sort of side of the game creep back up in this postseason. And I don't think it's going to be too easy for either team to score a ton of points. And I would not mind if that's the case. I think for Boston, probably the key is, force a bunch of those Warriors turnovers that they're prone to commit and have that transition success that got them the big lead in Game 7 of the East Finals. I just don't see them being able to do quite enough of that or score in the half court quite well enough to win this series. But we shall see. Yeah, I think if I had to put a number on the games, I'll go Warriors in 6.
Okay. Warriors in 6. If Steve Kerr wins, if the Warrior wins, Steve Kerr will get his 9th ring. I believe he'll enter top 5 all time in most rings as player or coach or executive.
Not bad.
I didn't expect him to be that successful. I'm completely honest with you. I didn't expect him to come off the broadcast booth into the Warriors bench boss job and then just start rattling off championships.
Here's a question for you. Do you guys think, I know this is a little off topic, but do you guys think Stan Van Gundy regrets not taking that job because he chose the Pistons instead?
Bro, every time I think of Stan Van Gundy, I cannot.
Yeah, I don't know why I ask you. You're a Stan Van Gundy hater. I should ask.
No, I'm not. No, I just think of Shaq calling him the master of panic when they had that verbal spat. It's just hilarious line by Shaq. But come on, man, Stan Van Gundy. I don't know if he could have taken his Warriors team. It was just a perfect. I mentioned fate earlier. I just think that this Kerr and Curry and Clay, the splash.
I don't believe in fate. I think he got them to play defense and he told them to shoot more threes. I think it was a combination of those two. Mark Jackson, well, no matter what you think of Mark Jackson, clearly it was a lot going on there, and I think the reasons why he hasn't gotten back
there
into
was a lot
the
going
NBA.
on. There were
So
assistant coaches recording conversations when they leave the room. There was all types of stuff going on.
I think, an uncontroversial statement there is Steve Kerr is a less polarizing personality than Mark Jackson, and that was beneficial and able to unify the locker room and get them motivated and moving and all in one direction. Just kind of a random thought there with Steve Kerr. Obviously played for the Spurs and late in his career, and just thinking ahead for Danny Green and the idea that maybe he has some qualities to be a good coach, even though he has resisted, Doc Rivers telling him that's what he's going to do. Wondering, if he doesn't come back to the Sixers, whether he plays again in San Antonio late in his career and whether that might be appealing, sort of coming home again. So that's kind of been.
That is Jay Wright's job, Noah. That Spurs job is Jay Wright's job.
Yeah, no, I mean, just like Danny Green, whatever, when he's back from this injury, his last days on the court being with the Spurs, whether that's sort of a cool idea. I know it would be like, for a lot of fans, that would be neat to see. And then also just Kerr being one of those guys who certainly wasn't a star player, but starred in his role, Danny Green being the epitome of that. And I think the stereotype that coaches who are good role players, often being excellent, behind
Darvin Ham coming out of the woodwork.
I think I do buy that a lot, because I think they have to think a lot about like the marginal elements of the game. And that's not to say that, a high usage in the spotlight star is not often super intelligent and super savvy, but I think these role players, they just have awareness of like everything it takes to, win on the margins in basketball. And Danny Green does strike me as one of those guys. So just something that's been on my mind. Maybe Danny Green ends up in San Antonio again in one way, shape, or form. And maybe there's a Steve Kerr-ish path for him where he plays for the Spurs late in his career and then also goes on to coach one day.
I misspoke. Steve Kerr would be tied 6 off time for the most rings with Pat Riley. He would be behind Red Auerbach, Phil Jackson, Casey Jones, Tommy Henson, and Bill Walton, Bill Russell.
Yeah, definitely Bill Russell. Yeah. Those Celtics teams obviously piled up quite a few rings. But Kerr's, I don't know his exact age, but you figure he's got some years left too. So he might get to the top.
Young side still.
Yeah.
Before we get to the Gilbert Arenas topic, I got to step away and talk about one of Danny Green's teammates. Both of you have mentioned Jimmy Butler earlier, and I have to speak my piece on this because Noah made the point about Jimmy not being a great three-point shooter, and that's not necessarily his forte, even though he ratchets it up for the postseason. Ben made the point about them being tired and overtime and whatnot. To me, if I'm Jimmy Butler, the shot clock is off, we're down 2, and we have fought all the way back. I'm trying to win the game, so I understand of shooting a 3. But at the same time, even if he makes it, it's like 15 seconds left, and the Celtics have a timeout. It's not even like it's a game-winning shot. Like, you're pulling up for 3, trying to play hero ball, and I'm that guy. That's my role for my team. But it is not the highest value, highest percentage shot at that point in time. I think he just got caught up in the moment. It was a bad shot. That's all I got to say.
His team backed him. Also, like Jimmy might not be a great
supposed to say? They're going to throw him under the bus after the game 7? Like, no one's going to do that.
Yeah. Many teams have done that. Some people think the Sixers did that last year. No. His teammates were okay with the shot. And Jimmy Butler might not be a great 3-point shooter. I think we all could say he's a pretty good clutch shooter. Like, he makes big shots in big moments.
Course,
I think that's definitely fair to say. Yeah, so
a fast break pull-up 3 with 20 seconds on the clock, though.
I didn't love the shot, but he was wide open. You know what? As much as we're talking about that shot being bad, the Matt Strus shot before that was 10 times worse.
But that's Max Strus, though.
But he made it, so no one's talking about it. He made it, so no one's talking about it. That shot was so incredibly worse.
Yeah, I think it was not one of the worst shots I've seen by any means. I think it's relevant that it was open, it was in rhythm. Butler was having a great game.
He hit one earlier in the game in the same fashion on the other basket. So we've seen him hit those shots. So I definitely give that to you.
Yeah, like it's not the best part of his game, but it's also not a shot where, for me, when he rose up, I thought, oh, that has no way of going in.
I thought it was going in. I was like, ooh.
It was, okay. Yeah, thought it was Jimmy's night. Yeah, I mean, there are some parallels one could draw, of course, to the 2019 Game 7, where Butler drove in for a fast break layup that tied the game, and then Kawhi Leonard had time to win it. So he thought the idea of getting the lead here was attractive in the moment. Yeah, I'm not gonna criticize him for any decision he makes there, just because of how.
Yeah, they wouldn't even be in that situation without him. Right.
Yeah,
best player on the team could do what he wants in that moment. Best player on the team. And as you said, they wouldn't be there. Somehow Bam Adebayo finished with 25 points. It was one of the quietest 25 I've ever seen in my life. Tyler Hero was injured, didn't play more than 6 or 7 minutes.
He was in the club after the game, though.
Hey, yo, the work day's over. Go enjoy your life. That's how I look at it.
He ain't even work. He ain't even put the work in. He was just
he did 6 minutes of work.
Hey man, speaking of putting in work, we got to get to this Doc Rivers comment. And you know what, all that Gilbert Arenas said about Doc Rivers and what has he done after winning the championship, and he only won the championship because of these fantastic players that he's had, and every year he's had fantastic players since then. He hasn't been able to do anything. I think those are valid criticisms that we have talked about at length.
Yes,
before Doc Rivers got hired. You agree? Like, we have talked about that.
That's what I've been saying for 3 years.
We have talked about that stuff at length before he got hired. The elephant in the room, or maybe not the elephant in the room, but the thing that will not ever be addressed, and maybe one day, 30 years from now, might be addressed, is the fact that he said he told that directly to Elton Brand. So if Elton Brand could corroborate that, or Gilbert and I had a conversation or whatever, that's the connection I think really adds a lot of validity to what Gilbert is saying, because, hey, regardless of what you think about Doc Rivers, some of those same sentiments and facts have portrayed themselves here with the 76ers, i.e. the 26-point lead they had in Game 5 against the Hawks, and the fact that they haven't gotten past the second round but have had regular season success. However, it has come to fruition, injuries or what have you. So I think the Elton Brand part is what really intrigues me about Gilbert's comments about Doc Rivers. What do you guys say?
It is, interesting. I think we knew and know that Elton Brand is a well-liked guy who has connections both on the player side and the agent side and the front office side. And it was striking to me that he communicated to this extent with Gilbert Arenas, and evidently, thought he had some good perspective to add, but not to the point that, of course, he took Arenas' recommendation that I have to do this. And we know how front offices work in general. It's never one person that has the final say. So that would be extraordinarily unconventional if Elton Brand was told by Gilbert Arenas, don't hire Doc Rivers, and then demanded that be the case. And but Doc Rivers, we used the word polarizing earlier with Mark Jackson. I think he has some similar qualities in that you look at his history of coaching stars, and he has very tight relationships with many of them, even to this day. But there's also plenty of tension. You can go back to Tracy McGrady and Paul Pierce and certainly Ray Allen. a lot of that, I think, has lessened as the years have passed, and we're at a point where he's got mutual respect with many of these guys and, strong personal relationships. But on the basketball side, he tends to coach people hard and rub some people the wrong way. And maybe, Gilbert Arenas' opinion of him is one reflection of that, not everyone who's been around Doc Rivers and heard about Doc Rivers loves him. But I do think there is a very significant other side of that many people who have played for Rivers appreciate, that he was a tough coach who ultimately led them to a lot of victories. So, he is certainly not universally liked, though. And Gilbert Arenas evidently is not a fan of Doc Rivers.
I don't know what Gilbert may or may not have told the Elton Brand. I don't know if Elton Brand will ever say, yes, this happened, or no, it didn't happen. My takeaway from that was, Gilbert Arenas is what I said, is saying what I've been saying for the past 2 years. And as Noah just detailed, like, he's won a championship and he has had great players. Not all those relationships have been great. And when it comes to accountability, which was a big thing after the Sixers lost to the Celtics in the playoffs and Brett Brown had got fired, that they wanted someone to hold the players accountable, to be tougher on the players. And Doc, who had just got fired from the Clippers, Paul George was very vocal about his disliking of Doc Rivers, as well as some other Clippers. The Lob City Clippers, there's been plenty of players, and Glenn Baby Davis, for one, who ironically also was with Doc Rivers in Boston, and Noah pointed out some of the players in Boston. I think the Sixers and many people could have just did a little bit more homework to figure out why these things were happening, instead of just getting the big name, which goes back to, I didn't think the Sixers had that much of a full fleshed out plan heading into that offseason.
Did definitely feel like a lot of the way that offseason played out, from their perspective, they thought like they were getting really lucky and like everything was falling into place for them, with Maureen Rivers in particular. The process there is certainly open to scrutiny. Absolutely. I'd be surprised if Elton Brand spoke candidly about this, but maybe it's a question that'll be faced. I'm curious how he would respond to it. Yeah.
I mean, either way, regardless of Arenas' comments, the facts tell us that there have been several head coaching candidates and head coaches, successful ones, that have been on that bench for the 76ers that did not get the job, regardless of timing or what have you, that have gone on to success. And the Sixers are stuck here, still reliving the same Groundhog Day of not getting past the second round.
Yeah, just thinking too about the whole accountability idea. I think Ben makes a good point there, and how the Sixers seem to approach that. Thought it was quite notable after Game 6 that Joel Embiid commented on. It doesn't really matter if coaches are like giving speeches. It's kind of on the players to motivate themselves and be internally driven to give strong effort in big games. I think he has a valid point, but of course it's not a sentiment that necessarily inspires like a ton of confidence in the head coach, to kind of lead his players over the top, or to be a exceptional motivator or what have you. So we'll see how things progress there with Doc Rivers. He talked at the exit press conference about he hasn't had much time to build a culture, and he is optimistic that they can make strides there and sort of instill the habits and way of working that he likes. He's had 2 years on the job, and it appears the third will be one that he'll be judged. Every move he makes, of course, in year 3, you figure, everyone will be watching to see how it works.
Noah, he said he hasn't had much time to build a culture.
Yeah, I don't want to misquote or misrepresent, but I think he definitely made the point that he is looking forward to further building a culture here, and that takes time, and that they're not a finished product in that area. So he thinks he can make some progress and sort of guys seeing the game the way he sees it and working the way he likes to work.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I just wonder how long it takes to build a culture. Danny, you got any insight on that?
Listen, all I can say is that I haven't liked what I've seen from the Sixers in the playoffs. That's all I can say. And we have seen this refrain from Doc Rivers before. That's all I can say. I liked Ime, though. I was an Ime guy.
I was Ime. I was Sam Cassell. I was Ty Lue. I was up for Noah becoming the head coach.
Were you a Ty Lue guy, Noah?
I didn't feel like I had quite enough insight to be like 100% confident of how he'd perform in his next job. But clearly, he was a good coach. There's evidence of that.
Who did you want before they hired Doc? Like, did you have a guy that you were thinking of would be a good fit?
I didn't have like this guy is the no-brainer call. I thought Ty Lue was a very strong candidate. And yeah, like I said with Udoka, I was sure that he was going to be a good head coach somewhere, but I did get the side of the time and place maybe not quite making sense in their eyes. And I also thought the defense was a little disappointing relative to the lofty expectations. So no, I mean, honestly, at that time, I didn't have a name of, this is for sure the guy. I was intrigued by the Mike D'Antoni speculation at that time, just because, of course, he's like an offensive innovator, offensive genius, but not known for coaching big men like Joel Embiid. And I wondered how that might all work, and thought it was an interesting outside the box option. But no, I didn't. I'm not going to pretend that I was sold on Ime Udoka becoming, the best coach ever for the Sixers or anything like that. I thought they had a difficult decision, especially just because Brett Brown was the culture guy here for so long, during the process, and Joel Embiid's coach for his whole career. I didn't think it was an easy call. I did think, like I said, from their perspective, like they thought everything just kind of fell into their laps. And I thought that maybe was a little bit deceptive, and that maybe, that whole process could have played out a little differently just in terms of, who they interviewed and what have you. But Doc Rivers has gotten 2 years under his belt. And of course, if things don't go well in year 3, a lot of change could be on the table yet again, but he is optimistic that they can move in a better direction here.
I will say the culture and vibes of the Sixers Talk podcast are always immaculate, and we appreciate you tuning in, contributing what you bring to this podcast. Make sure to check out Noah Levick's work at NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com and follow him on social media at Noah Levick. Ben Barry, you're at I'm Ben Barry on all social media platforms. I am the Pommells NBCS. Follow us, check us out, respond, comment, let us know what you're thinking about. We're thinking and talking Sixers all the time. Be sure to check us out in the next podcast. We are brought to you by Wilmington University. Wilm U Works. We appreciate you listening and tuning in. We'll see you next time.